Hey guys, welcome back to the Casual NBA Fanatic podcast. Now, today's episode, I just want to hit off a fun topic that I've been thinking about. Obviously, we're about the halfway point through the season, not yet to the All-Star game, but very, very close by. And so I wanted to go through more of just a playoff scope of things about how things are going to pan out. And in terms of looking towards playoff resilience and more of specifically the scoring aspect of things. So basically, today's topic, the top 5 most playoff resilient scorers in my eyes if the playoffs were to start tomorrow. Now, I came up with a little criteria of things. It's not like a percentage thing of like each point is weighted a certain metric. I think it's 6 different factors that I'm valuing when I did come up with this list. This is just more of a fun thought process for now. And to be honest with you, this list absolutely sucks. Because except for the top 3 guys, who are, in my eyes, pretty obvious. I hope that doesn't give it away, but the top 3 are pretty obvious. The last 2 spots had to go to guys, obviously, that I thought deserved a placing here, but the people that missed out, like, there are going to be some names that didn't make this list that it does not sound right. But, you know what, we'll get through it. We'll start off with the criteria first up. And my first point I've got is the level of resilience against different matchups. So basically, how do you fare between a team that can throw out a ton of high-level rangy athleticism, a ton of long, lengthy wings that can contain like space coverage really well? How do you go against teams with a ton of physicality on the perimeter who can deny you at the hip? If you're a big man, how do you go against vertical rim protectors? Can you actually overcome them with your strength and size, or does their vertical coverage kind of disrupt everything that you do out of the post? Again, if you're a big man, how do you go against creating space on post-ups against highly physical bigs who can also match your footwork? So there's all these different things. Or if you're a heavy pick and roll player, how do you go against a team that can throw out vertical rim protection, guys that can switch or come to the level? How do you go against like low drop coverage types of bigs? There's all these different schemes that teams are stronger at. And it's basically your level of resilience against those different types of matchups. You have teams with a ton of speed and athleticism, like what Golden State and OKC can throw out. You have a ton of teams with more physical athleticism, less speed-based, but you have your Minnesotas, maybe even your San Antonios, just more physical athleticism. Then you have your just brutal physical teams like your Denvers and your Houston Rockets. How do you go against different defenses, basically? Second criteria point. Your shot diversity for playoff basketball. Now, shot diversity is kind of just general. Can you create and execute on different shots on everywhere on the floor? That is extremely valuable when you do go against the top tier defenses, because you need to have a set amount of counters to be able to score effectively and consistently to be able to actually lead a championship level team. Third point. Physical and athletic tools that you can lean on. So basically, just how good are your physical and athletic traits, and basically just the amount of different athletic and physical traits. So just how potent those physical traits can be. Surprise, surprise, Nikola Jokic is somewhere on this list. His strength advantage is mighty valuable, but he doesn't have speed advantages. There aren't any agility advantages in his game that he can lean on when he is creating those shots specifically for himself. But that strength advantage does weight a lot. So basically, physical and athletic tools that you do have. Third criteria point, different possession types that you can score effectively in. This is basically, are you good on and off ball scorer? That's kind of the main point. The fifth point, half court thriving. Basically, in mostly those 5-on-5 slowed down basketball like sceneries, how do you go against there when the game is fully slowed down and there's no initial transition advantage? There's no cross match advantage. It's just 5-on-5 set defense against set offense. How do you go running? This is specifically important for clutch basketball context, and that dictates a lot of winning in the playoffs. My sixth and final point was the measure of how much your overall production and your overall efficiency combination either increases or drops. So for me, this list of guys are all players that need to be high volume scorers, but basically, naturally, usually your production does tend to wane when you do hit the playoffs. how much does it drop or increase when we do get to the playoffs? Basically how it translates towards more of a basic statistical standpoint. Now, we're going to start off with number 5. Maybe the player that I think would be the biggest surprise out of who I do have on this list. And that is Donovan Mitchell. Now, he was a hard one because I had to bump off a few players off this list to actually chuck him on here. But historically, and we have a big sample size with Donovan Mitchell, from 2017 to 2025, through 8 seasons of NBA playoff experience, he's averaged, and this is like remarkable. And like when I saw this, I couldn't not put him on this list. Through 8 playoffs, he's averaged 28 points on 51% effective field goal percentage. Just an absurdly gifted physical and athletic combination that he's always brought year by year. We're talking body contortion. We're talking about like elite agility, peak elevation, and that staggeringly high release point on his jump shots. Extremely powerful upper body frame to get downhill as well, and actually not just burst past the first line of defense, but to discard rim protectors with his own size and powerful momentum that he does generate on his drives. I believe a ton in what he can do as a rim pressure as well. That's where most of these athletic traits do tend to lead to as well. His ability to literally get to the rim for the most efficient basketball. Donovan Mitchell in the playoffs, routinely, 30% of his shots are directly at the rim. And we're talking about a guy that's about 6'2", 6'3". Absolutely remarkable. He's also someone that, and this is when it comes to like the versatility of his scoring palette, always has defenders on both their toes, but also on their heels. Players have to respect the jump shot to such an absurd degree when he does get into that microwave shot making phase. He also has defenders on their heels when he does provide so much like a driving pressure threat. And that creates the variety that he brings as a scoring threat as well. So you have to really appreciate that sense. In terms of load carrying, this is another big thing. Like when you talk about floor raising, that's such a big component in the playoffs. When the talent around you tends to wane a little bit, and you know, guys like Evan Mobley and Darius Garland come up against matchups where they can't be as successful. They can't throw their unique traits out, and their offensive effectiveness basically falls off a cliff. Donovan Mitchell is then thrusted into more of a floor-raising context where he does have to create a boatload of shots on his own self-creation. In terms of the load carrying, there aren't many players that can manufacture the number of efficient shots for a team to what Donovan Mitchell can do as a scorer. And we've seen against highly physical interior basketball teams as well. Like we saw against Orlando 2 years ago where he has enough power and strength to be able to combat those physical big interiors, and he can actually flourish against stronger frames. Like he had a 50-piece, a 39-piece to close out that series, which I think was 2 years ago now. And then also we've seen him thrive against more ball pressure oriented point of attack defenses like Indiana and Boston. Maybe against a team like OKC, or maybe even against a team like San Antonio, like we've seen in regular season games where he can actually struggle. But against the teams in the East, he's actually fared really well against those ball pressure oriented teams. He actually can lean on athletic and physical advantages against defenders like Andrew Nembhard, against defenders like Aaron Nesmith and Ben Shepherd and whatnot. And that's really where you lean into like the matchup resilience component with Donovan Mitchell. He's proved it year by year ever since he's been in the league. And for Mitchell, it's mostly just about the combination of having such high jump shot quality. Every look that he takes, there's always naturally just a ton of airspace. So the quality and the comfort that as a team you have on leaning on that jump shot quality, and that stems from, you know, the strength-based separation, the hesitation tools he can use to throw off defenders on the perimeter too. So he's an exceptional ball handler as well, but also just the ability that he has to also dissect defenses with all the powerful penetration tools that he has. That just offers such a stable base as a playoff resilient scorer. And honestly, someone that honestly finds, especially when the aggression like notches up come playoff time, he puts up bigger numbers typically in the playoffs than he does in the regular season. Saw that last year. Obviously, he's in a real floor-raising context right now with Cleveland being pretty inconsistent. I have no doubt he'll be absolutely exceptional once again come playoff time. Now, moving on to number 4, we have, he's young, a lot of hype around this guy, been a lot of hype around this guy for years, and he has achieved a lot in the playoffs so far. but we do have Anthony Edwards. Maybe it was expected. I think probably should be expected at this point in time, especially with the leap that he's made. Now, with Ant, it's similar to Donovan Mitchell in the sense of, like, we're talking about, like, pure shot quality on all of his looks. Again, he's just a superior athlete who weaponizes every one of his gifts and he just gives himself the best initial advantages on every single look that he tends to settle for. The differentiator for me between both these guys is Ant's increase in intermediate shot hunting from this regular season that we've seen. And in theory, I believe that trait alone and that, tendency will make him just a more efficient and more sustainable possession-based scorer in the half court, especially come playoff environments and in the clutch as well. Just your ability to lean on just more efficient shots on that possession-based standard. Partially, what is different, like obviously, to be honest, I've been more impressed by Donovan Mitchell as a playoff scorer in his career compared to what we have seen from Ant. So partially, I am banking a lot of this on what we've seen in this regular season alone. This is a very big difference to what we saw last year. And with Ant, he's averaging 30 points on 59% effective field goal percentage. Absolutely elite scoring right now. And honestly, like doing similar to what we saw from SGA last year in terms of aggregate efficiency. And the fact that he's actually increased the mid-range attempts by 7% this year alone, that is helping him bridge the gap that we saw last year between him and SGA as pure scoring archetypes right now. I think he's slowly closing the gap. I think by next year, we're going to be looking at Anthony Edwards as a shoe-in top 5 player in the NBA. I might have him around the 7 to 8 range right now. But in terms of playoff resilient scoring, Anthony Edwards, to me, is one-on-one. Like we talked about the separation tools and the ability for him to get peak elevation and offer such a major driving threat, that opens up all of the jump shot quality. The only part is he's consistently made jumpers at a much higher level than Donovan Mitchell has from the last 2 years combined. Obviously, Mitchell's been unbelievable with the shot making this year. So has Ant, and he's done this for last year too. And, last year, like when I talk about the shot variants that he's introduced more so this year, last season in the playoffs especially, like we saw it was mostly just the complete the 3-point shots and just the rim pressure combination. But by enhancing that shot diversity and the shot hunting tendencies, I just believe Ant will fare much better come playoff time for Minnesota. And that's when you look into the toolbox of athleticism with the power. He's got enough agility. He can actually contort his body in the lane. Not like Mitchell can, but he's got more over-the-top advantages, more size, more, in theory, strength. I think he'll fare a little bit better than Donovan Mitchell will come playoff time. But he doesn't land in my top 3 because my top 3 guys are, to me, probably in a vacuum, the best scorers in the NBA, I want to say, when we do go through this context. Now, number 3, I honestly was going to have this guy at number 2, but we have to go a lot of what we've seen from this regular season as well, not just what we've seen in past years. So at number 3, I have Luka Doncic. I don't know if that was a surprise either. I don't think so. The next 2 probably won't be either, but yeah, I was going to have Luka second, but from this season, what we've seen just with the 3-point gap between him and who I have above him, who's the other perimeter guy on this list, just the gap in 3-point efficiency, but also just the low quality looks that he does settle for. I know Luka plays with poor talent, so a lot of the time he is shot settling when there isn't much to actually create, not many advantages to create in such a shitty offensive environment, but he does tend to actually look for a really cheap outlets on a lot of these really tough step back contested threes all the time. So just the maturity is a little bit of a notch down from what we saw even just a few years ago. I think he's taking like 11 threes a game now. If that's like 3 more than he was taking a few years ago, that's a substantial amount of possessions each game, especially when the margins in the playoffs are so razor thin. The other point is the drop in rim pressure focus with Luka. He's getting to the rim and he's finishing at the rim. Still, like he's bumped up those numbers this year, but the focus on it isn't the same as it was when he was in Dallas. And it wasn't that 2024 version just yet. But another point as well, though, like the actual shot diet for Luka, like again, like I'm talking about the 3-point gap and the decrease in rim pressure, that's enough to actually reduce the playoff value that he brings. But the actual shot diet, like, it's decreased year by year very significantly. And in terms of the actual efficiency focus, like, right now, Luka is getting to the rim just 13% of the time. And so it's the lack of shot variety for me that does reduce the actual overall scoring effectiveness of his game. Like, I think Mitchell and Ant are much more diversified scorers, not offensive players. We're differentiating this term, scoring the basketball here. But what I will say is, and why I do have him above those guys, is that Luka, at the end of the day, like what we have seen this season, he's legit leading the league in scoring, and he's getting to the line more than everyone else in the league. So you can't play physical against this guy's major disadvantage for physically athletic point of attack defenses when they do match up against Luka, like Denver. Like, he absolutely torches Denver like he did just before. Like, you can't actually play physical on him because he gets to the rim so well. He's so good at anticipating and, you know, making that contact come to actual calls. And obviously, when I talk about him leading the league in scoring, a lot of that is to do with aggression. He's taking like 22, I think he's just taking under 23 shots a game right now. But for the most part, like, with Luka, when you do watch him, he does always exhibit the same pace control, the slow, methodical shot creation principles. They're all still there. And that's when you talk about that 5-on-5 criteria point. That 5-on-5 criteria pillar where you're talking about actual clutch basketball in the half court when there aren't set advantages. That is when Luka thrives, and that is where Luka's value does skyrocket more compared to Donovan Mitchell and Anthony Edwards. And to be honest, maybe above the guys that I do have above him to a degree. In isolation, Luka's tied with SGA at 1.18 points per possession. That is the best, clear best among high volume isolation scorers in the NBA, obviously tied with SGA. But he's still scoring the ball remarkably out of one-on-one. It's because of the different traits that he can lean on, which transcend to every single matchup. He also still spams the most pick and rolls in the NBA still, 12 a game. And he's converting at 1.03 points per possession, which isn't SGA efficient, but it's still 85th percentile great in the NBA. That will no doubt fare extremely well in the floor raising context, especially if the Lakers do have an injury, especially if LeBron can't get to the postseason at 100%. That will fare really well for that standard when we talk about the actual scoring aspect of things. And it really stems, like, the reason why he might be the best pick and roll player in general, and like, SGA might be the best pick and roll scorer, but Luka's the best pick and roll player. Passing aside, because that is the differentiator between the two, but Luka can man and like tread back pressure better than probably any guard in the NBA. He uses his strong frame for that ball security aspect, and then just the ability that he has when he does tread the back pressure, keeps the player in jail. That's when he can actually force continuous 2-on-1 downhill advantages towards the paint. And that happens with whatever pick and roll partner he has, as long as they're semi-athletic, good touch, good hands. DeAndre Ayton, basically, and then Jackson Hayes has been really valuable in this two-man game. And when he is assertive at hunting downhill looks for himself, that is when he's been astronomically efficient, basically back to that Dallas version of himself in terms of the reliability of converting at the rim. That is what I believe in when we do talk about the playoff scoring of things. He's making 83% of his shots at the rim, and he's making 51% of his shots in that short mid-range, and 50% on long mid-range looks. That is unbelievable. The efficiency is deterred by the amount of shots that he is taking. But on the other hand, though, we saw SGA's three-point shot absolutely leave him last year. And the only difference between SGA and Luka, to me, when we do talk about the three-point shot making and the trust that I have in their shooting, is SGA can't create anywhere near the same airspace typically as what Luka can. I actually think Ant and Donovan Mitchell, their shot quality as three-point shooters than SGA is a little bit higher because they can actually lean on the physical point to actually create that space. SGA can't do that to the same degree as those guys. Luka is one of the biggest and most physical point guards that we have ever seen, and that translates to his three-point comfortability there as well. Like, the amount of enormous value that Luka gets, not just out of the physicality that we spoke about before, not that you can also keep players on his heels and toes, because all of these scorers do that. They keep their defenders needing to respect the drive, need to respect the shot. both heels and toes. But the thing is, Luka has the over-the-top advantage where he doesn't even need to lean on elevation to get to it. He releases the ball so high, and he's 6'7", so he doesn't even need to rely on those traits. And that's what makes the three-point shot extremely comfortable and something that typically does translate. He gets a ton of strength under the ball as well when he does settle for even deeper looks, when he is physically harassed down late shot clock at looks as well. We're looking at razor-thin margins here when we are differentiating the best scorers in the NBA. To me, Luka I think the three-point comfortability is also a separator why he is 100% a top 3 playoff scorer in the NBA. Last year, the only thing I'll say is he was a bit of a shell of himself. I think he still, this is just a funny stat I pulled up. It's pretty basic. Last year in the playoffs, he averaged 30 points on 53% effective field goal percentage. That was a shell of Luka. This year, new set of agility gears. That'll make a major dramatic difference as well. Maybe not as much if you went to like a Minnesota matchup, but he will be absolutely so much better in terms of actually being able to pressure the rim against more athletically empowered defenses too. But I just think Luka, the amount of separation that he also creates on the perimeter, it's a bit more than last year. I think he's a top 3 scorer on the planet, and I think he's a top 3 playoff resilient scoped scorer. That's why I have him here at number 3. But moving on to number 2, I've said his name quite a few times. It's SGA. I originally had SGA at number 3 because Luka's physical advantage to me is so overwhelming, to be honest with you, when you get to the postseason. I don't know if Luka's as strong as he was in 2024, but I'd rather have the new set of agility gears on his lower body, to be honest with you. But SGA takes the spot here at number 2, literally for being the best shot hunter in the NBA. And I don't really need to harp on SGA for too long here. We're talking about GOAT level agility leverage. So probably the best balance in the NBA, especially in the most suffocated environments. Like we saw that against Minnesota last year. We saw that against Denver Zone last year as well, in those games where SGA did flourish. We saw that in late game shot making against Indiana, where he completely willed OKC back into the series. So elite balance. Again, like we talked about with Donovan Mitchell and Anthony Edwards, peak elevation principles as well. The only thing is he's also 6'6", so he gets an extra inch of that release valve on his release point. And he's also mastered change of pace, change of direction, and like literal angle selection. And you'll never see someone more refined in that cognitive aspect of actually deciding where and when and how to attack. Because he's got all the agility points, all the agility advantages that you could want, and he uses them better than anyone that we've ever seen in NBA history, in my opinion. He's not overly strong. Obviously, he's got a strong core and stuff. He's a strong basketball player. He knows how to actually distribute his weight better than anyone else. That is the point that makes SGA good at creating separation, but he can't lean on the strength as much as guys like Kobe and Michael Jordan could have. So that's where you see even more of a gap in their reliability as scorers. Historically, SGA's agility levels, to me, are the best that we've ever seen. And that's why I do think for playoff resilient scoring, last year he did wax and wane a little bit as a scorer in terms of his shot touch and creating the separation. I think right now he's at the most refined version that he is as a shot creator. And the thing with SGA, and like we're going to go onto it like from what we took from Ant, and like we have to judge a lot of this on what we're seeing this current regular season, because for the most part, these guys are all young basketball players who aren't past their primes just yet. They're not fully matured as basketball players just yet. And so SGA has leveled up his efficiency once again. 60% effective field goal percentage. That's absurd. The three-point efficiency has dialed up as well. He's making 40% of his threes on 5 attempts a game. He's more selective on his three-point shots for Luka, which I actually appreciate a bit more as a basketball fan. If you're more selective on low-quality looks, that'll pan out better, especially when we look at the 5-on-5 half-court offense concepts. And honestly, though, the 40% from 3, that's just another major avenue for SGA for the efficient shot-making piece as well. So when we do talk about shot diversity and variety, he matches the notch up there. And last year, SGA had the tied second most 30-point games in any single playoff run. So the evidence is already there. The proof is in the pudding. We know what SGA can do come playoff time. Yes, the efficiency on paper wasn't as staggering because, yes, the three-point shot left him. He doesn't lean on the three as much as a lot of guys do. SGA was absolutely remarkable last year in terms of the consistency of providing that floor-raising scoring to a defensive-minded championship team. Last year, I got to bring it up again, though, because it does add to the point. He lost his three in the playoffs last year. He only made 28% of them. Again, he can't create the same physical space as what these other guys do. He doesn't have the same athletic elevation principles in his jump shot mechanics that Donovan Mitchell and Anthony Edwards can lean onto. He doesn't release the ball to the same staggering height that Luka releases the ball at either. So that stuff does fare into that. So that does drop his value. That's why he's not the best scorer in the playoff scope of things to me. But the separation toolbox, like obviously maybe not strength-based, but the actual separation toolbox, when you look at the agility, he does have a bit of strength behind that too. That matched with the shot-making reliability when he does dig down towards those intermediate looks, that in itself still excelled so much last year in the postseason. And that's why he ultimately was our finals MVP and the best scorer that we've seen the past few years when you talk about the numbers that he can put up. In the playoffs last year, still 63% at the rim, 47% in the paint, 46% from from the mid-range, longer mid-range types of looks. Those two last points, 47% in the paint, 46% in the mid-range, 4 playoff series, straight to the finals against the defenses that he had to go up against. Absolutely tremendous in my eyes. And last season, we're talking about a guy who in the playoffs, out of 233 field goals made, 204 of them were unassisted. So that's when you talk about the floor raising and the load carrying for a team. It's a lot you can lean on as a team, as a franchise, and the amount of comfort that you have sending your 1A to be able to self-create his looks at that type of level come playoff time against multiple types of defenses. That is where SGA has excelled, and the evidence is why he's number 2 for me. Yes, again, not the same elite basic athletic tools. Like he's not absurdly fast or explosive speed-wise. He's not physically strong like Luka is or the guy I have at number 1, who I've already mentioned before anyways. But he actually compounds all of these different gifts and he knows how to use them. Like he knows how to weaponize a speed advantage when he does have one. He knows how to make his drives super efficient by angling his drives as much as he can, coming around ball handlers. He knows how to set up his guys for screens better than anyone does because he's got that nimble frame as well. SGA is the second best scorer in the NBA in terms of just talent-wise to me. He's the second greatest playoff resilient scorer when we do look in the scope of things. Now, number 1, I really don't need to spend actually much time at all on this guy. We've already mentioned him before. Nikola Jokic is the best scorer in the NBA to me when you talk about talent, what he can do efficiency-wise, production-wise, just complete floor and ceiling raising components as well, what he can do in the flow of an offense, what he can do actually making the offense as well. And we've seen it for years. We saw it in the most dramatic way when he did win the title just 3 years ago. And I've already talked about it. It stems from him literally having the greatest physical advantage in the game, which he leverages at the highest volume in the post. And when you do, obviously we're talking about the strength and power that he has and the over-the-top advantages, that whole combination. But when we're talking about hunting most of your scoring chops in the post, that is the most efficient basketball for 5-on-5 half-court execution. That's also when you can control the pace of games the best as well. You can protect the ball with your size as well. You can see the floor. You're getting, literally Jokic touching the ball in the post is you probably have a 2/3 of a chance of the ball going in the rim, regardless of if it's playoffs or not. That's an advantage within itself. You send the ball there, he's getting double sent. That's an advantage created. It's the most seamless way for any offense to get an advantage in a 5-on-5 playoff cutthroat environment. Jokic touching the ball on the elbow or in the post. That's valuable for me. But we're not talking about offensive value as such. We're talking about scoring. Right now, Jokic is making 66% of his hook shots. You know the degree of difficulty it is to take those post looks as well in suffocated traffic like he experiences every single possession? That is unbelievable. 66% of his hook shots. 72% on layups. He's 1.28 points per possession on 6 post-ups per game. 1.3 points per possession you're basically getting out of Jokic post-ups. Maybe that doesn't sound insane to you. It's completely dominant by every sense of the word. And when we talk about offensive value, like when you add in like the actual passing, floor vision, spatial awareness, that's just where Jokic just ascends to that point where we do talk about him as the offensive GOAT. But the actual scoring value that he gives you from the efficiency focus and from the inevitability of the scoring, that is the different part with Jokic. Now, if we are talking about specifically scoring alone, literally no one in the NBA hits the same combination of wild outlier efficiency rates with extremely damaging, like matchup resilient production. Against any team, this guy's putting up the same numbers and he's doing it in the same efficiency manner for the most part. Obviously, we see guys like Ivica Zubac, maybe that Jusuf Nurkic type of build, guys that can absorb physicality, deal with some of the footwork combinations that he tries to throw at you as well. Obviously, we can see those guys throw off his looks a little bit. But this guy, more or less, he'll put up ghastly production numbers on very, very, very good efficiency levels. That's the point with Jokic when we are talking about just the scoring value and the scoring stability of his game. Now, we are just 3 years removed from that championship run, as I mentioned before. And we're talking about a guy who, this is the peak of playoff Jokic, by the way. We're not talking about before, otherwise we would bring up the numbers from the last few years. But Jokic actually has a ceiling that we've seen eventuate throughout an entire playoff run towards a finals MVP, where he averaged 30 points for an entire playoff run on 55, 46, 80 splits. And when we do talk about the variety of actions that you can score out of, that was one of my criteria components, which I haven't spoken about much, because we are talking about guys that typically create out of ISO and pick and roll. Mostly, these aren't guys that situate themselves off ball as much. But Jokic is one of the greatest off-ball scorers in the NBA because of his ability to actually fight for positioning, for deep post positioning out of the post as well. That contributes to his scoring production, but also just the pick and pop value, the value he has at the elbow as well, as a cutter, as a roller. He's the best scorer in the NBA. I don't think it's really close, to be honest with you. Obviously, he won't put up the same numbers because he doesn't have the same aggression, because he can lean on other tools to create his offense. SGA, not a very decent passer right now. Like, I'm not saying anything against that. Luka, one of the best passers in the NBA. They need to be uber aggressive as scorers to instill their value. Jokic doesn't have to. If he wanted to, Jokic would easily lead this league in scoring. And he'll do it in the playoffs every year if he could. So basically, Jokic's point, it's the shot touch variety. It's the elite on and off ball scoring in position. It's the elite physical tools. He's just Nikola Jokic. He's at a playoff average throughout his entire career. This is when he was just an ascending star as well, not just MVP level Jokic. 27 points on 57% effective field goal percentage. And this is in the postseason when you are dealing in the most suffocated environments as a big man, as a post-centric and role-centric big man. He's the best scorer in the NBA, best scorer in the playoffs. So those are my five, basically. So obviously I left off guys like Jalen Brunson, Kevin Durant, obviously like guys like Tatum went on here. Maybe like there's probably a few guys that on top of my head I didn't think of. If you thought this list was going to be about the guys that translate the best in the playoffs, as in like their production goes up, I actually thought about Jamal Murray. I didn't want to put him there. I think the last few playoff series have actually debunked a bit less of that physical advantage that he has on the perimeter, creating separation. But I mainly wanted to lean towards guys that if you actually chuck them with bad offensive talent, you actually might be able to win a playoff series on the offensive side of the ball because of how transcendently great they are as scorers. And so that's why I did come up to these guys as well. And look, I hope you guys enjoyed that quick hitting list. It was just more of just a nice thought process to think about. I've been at home the past few days with, cut hand at the moment. So to be honest with you, watching all this basketball right now, I'm watching the NBA regular season kind of transcend to a bit loose basketball where you are having these bad teams like Sacramento and like Charlotte, maybe even like Utah be like pretty competitive in these games as well, like knocking off some actual real playoff teams. I think now it's kind of cool to actually look at the playoff concept and who I anticipate to be the best scorers when we do get there, considering that we will see all five of these guys in the postseason this year. Now, I hope you guys enjoyed that. I had a bit of fun actually going through that list as well. Actually, just talking about my favorite scorers in the NBA from what I value. Obviously, you guys might value different principles when we are talking about playoff concepts. What makes guys successful in playoff environments compared to what we do see in the regular season. There's a lot of hype around these guys. There's a lot of hype around guys that I didn't put on this list. Love to know what you guys think. Let me know on the Instagram as well. Stay tuned. I'll catch you guys in the next one.